Hello and welcome to Diversity Training. My name is Carrie Springmeyer and I will be your host for this presentation. Today we're going to talk about the Gullah Geechee population along the coastlines of South Carolina, Georgia, and parts of Florida. We're going to talk about the origin of the population, cultural influences, language, belief systems, and obstacles for healthcare professionals. And to be clear, the obstacles are for healthcare professionals are ignorance on the part of the healthcare professionals, lack of understanding of this particular culture. So hopefully we can clear up some of these misconceptions today and learn to appreciate the differences of others. So where did this population come from? These are former slaves, mostly brought over from West Africa. There are some Creole influences from the southern Atlantic islands like Haiti and Barbados. Some Native American influences, mostly with food like cornbread and succotash, and herbal remedies, although some do contest any link between the indigenous populations and the Gullah population. So what are some cultural influences? And I'm just going to go over a few today. If I were to discuss cultural influences and the breadth of them would take hours upon hours upon hours, maybe even days. So let's talk about food. Rice and okra, greens are greens and rice. These are traditional African dishes, and you'll find them in the South. All of us eat them. They come from the Gullah population. Red rice. If you're from Charleston, probably the other places in the South, I am from Charleston, you know red rice, and that too is African based, and it comes directly from the Gullah population. If you add gumbo to that, you have your Creole influence right there. You'll find that in Louisiana as well. Arts and crafts are another thing that the Gullah population have brought to the South. Sweetgrass baskets, everybody's going to know what those are. They're beautiful, beautiful baskets. And that basket weaving comes directly from Africa and directly from the Gullah population. They have kept it alive. Rice production. The African slaves brought over rice production. We did not have that in the South prior to them coming with those farming techniques. And I'd also like to talk about the Gullah language. It is not poor English. It is not uneducated English. In fact, it is not English. It is Gullah, and it is its own language with its own set of grammatical rules. Its influences are West African dialect, Creole influences from islands like Barbados, like we mentioned earlier, and English. If you want to see a really cool representation of the Gullah language, I have included a link to the Gullah Bible. It is the written word of Gullah in their Bible. It's very interesting. I understand most of it. But some of it I do not. The words are different, the phrases are different, it's a different culture, it's a different language. And it's important to understand that when you have a patient from this particular population and they don't understand you and you don't understand what they're saying, you have an actual language barrier. You might want to see if there's anyone in your facility that can speak Gullah. Perhaps they can act as an interpreter so that you make sure that your communications are clear. The belief systems. These are highly spiritual people. They are big into Christianity, but this Christianity is intermixed with African tribal beliefs. So it's all intermeshed into one. God is everywhere. God is the natural force. God is nature. God is everywhere. And it's a really cool religion. It's not like your basic Christianity. It's very musically based, very beat based. It's very interesting. And every part of their life and influences. There's a lot of herbal remedies that are passed down through families and generations. This is a storytelling. This is a verbal communication. It's an oral education in a lot of ways. And these are going to be based on indigenous herbs growing around the area. Another fun fact, the life everlasting or everlasting life plant is indigenous to South Carolina. It was used in a lot of remedies, and I didn't know what it was, so I looked it up, and apparently it is illegal in South Carolina and also indigenous to South Carolina. So I thought that was funny. But it could literally be a weed in your backyard if you live in South Carolina, and it's illegal. Don't be a rebel. So the oldest of the old, even the younger old, may remember root doctors in their community. These were going to be your experts in the herbal remedies, in the holistic medicines, in the natural cures, and in the unnatural cures. So they were all also going to deal with spells and voodoo and bad juju, are things you would go to the root doctor for. And they might still remember that, might still be in the community. Another thing to remember about the Gullah population is what they do view as natural and unnatural. For instance, diabetes, type 2 diabetes, runs through this particular population. There's a very high prevalence for this condition. They view this as natural. But what they might not view as natural are some of our remedies, which would be testing blood sugar. So needles, especially for the oldest of the old, they're going to view that as unnatural. Insulin would be unnatural. They're not going to see this as a remedy that they're going to view it with suspicion. They might be more willing to take a pill. So in these types of instances, especially with the oldest of the old, you might want to rethink your approach. Your approach might be more of an educational on diet and exercise. This population would be willing to walk, get out in nature, garden. A lot of the Gullah population have their own gardens. I used to call it a victory garden. My grandmother had one of her own. So they're very proud of it. They eat a lot of vegetables, but maybe a little bit of education piece on granulated sugar and things like that. So maybe just change up the approach a little bit to meet the beliefs of the people. But we should be doing that with everyone, really. Recommend healthy alternatives. So you have to have conversations about diet to understand what they're eating and how to take a holistic approach to better control blood sugar. So if you're not going to have someone that's going to test their blood sugar, how do you help them control it? The prevalence is, so know the language. MUSC has a really great diversities training that their med students go through, and I've provided a link in my references. It goes through the language and the beliefs of some of the more common illnesses like diabetes, like hypertension, so why they believe these things are happening, what they might use to cure them, what a healthcare professional needs to ask about so that you understand what's happening in the home as you're suggesting your or prescribing your treatments. So that's a really interesting article, and I encourage everyone to read it. This is a beautiful culture, and I just will conclude with a TED Talk that I listened to by Ron Days. He had a program called Gullah Gullah Island in the 90s, geared at children to put a positive light on the African American community and African American families. And he talks about the shame that he had about his culture and how he tried to distance himself from this culture. But what he discovered is that it is a beautiful culture, and you should have pride in this culture. There's so many things about it that, each of us could learn from. And I feel that way about all cultures and just people in general. So it's really helpful for healthcare professionals to understand the people that they're talking about and to find the things about them that they appreciate. Thank you for your time. I appreciate that, and I hope you have a wonderful day.